Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. November of 1972. The Pacific Ocean sits just beyond the perimeter fence like something indifferent and immovable, gray and cold and completely unimpressed by the rank or the record of anyone it has swallowed over the years. The water here does not care how many years you have trained. It does not care about your deployment history or your kill count or the decorations pinned to your chest. It simply is. Cold and constant and honest in a way that most human institutions fail to be. The base smells like diesel fuel, ocean salt, and the particular kind of sweat that serious physical work produces over years. Not gym sweat. Not the clean, measured sweat of someone who stopped when it got uncomfortable. The deep kind. The kind that has soaked into concrete floors and canvas mats and does not leave because it was never meant to. The training yard behind Building 7 is wide and flat and practical. Nothing decorative has been allowed to survive here. There are pull-up bars bolted into a steel frame at one end. There is a heavy bag suspended from a reinforced ceiling hook inside the open bay to the left. There are gray canvas mats rolled out in the center of the concrete yard, 3 of them, end to end, each one approximately 2 inches thick, each one honest about the fact that landing on it was still going to cost you something. It is a Tuesday morning. Mid-November. The kind of morning where the California coast forgets to be California, where the sky and the concrete are the same shade of gray and even the light seems to be operating at reduced capacity. 200 men stand in formation in the courtyard. Navy SEALs. Support personnel. A scattering of officers from neighboring commands who have received a memo describing the day's event as a martial arts evaluation and demonstration. The language is appropriately military. Neutral. It says nothing about what is actually about to happen inside it. And at the back of the formation, arms folded, jaw set, wearing a faded training shirt with the sleeves cut off at the shoulder, stands Master Chief Petty Officer Cole Rafferty. He is 36 years old. He stands 6 feet 2. He weighs 242 pounds of combat-engineered muscle arranged across a frame that has been put through conditions most human beings will not encounter in their lifetimes and has never once failed to produce the required result. His hands look like they were manufactured rather than grown. His neck is roughly the diameter of a standard tree trunk. His face has been broken in at least 2 places and reset with the kind of indifference that only comes from a man who decided long ago that aesthetics were irrelevant to function. He is not a cruel man. The people who have served alongside him will tell you this without hesitation. He is demanding and uncompromising and genuinely devoted to every man under his command. He would walk into a burning building without a second thought for any one of them. But Cole Rafferty possesses one quality that has survived every training evolution, every deployment, every experience that should have dismantled it entirely. He has never been wrong about a fighter. Not once. Not in 16 years of military service. He has looked at men in every physical category a human being can inhabit, and he has always known, within the first 30 seconds of observation, exactly what they were capable of and what they were not. This skill had saved his life more than once. It had also made him completely incapable of imagining that it could fail. The government vehicle that came through the main gate at 0847 that morning was a standard civilian sedan. California plates. No insignia, no military markings, nothing that announced its passenger as anything in particular. The man who stepped out of it was small. That was the first thing the gate officer registered and the first thing every person who saw him cross the yard registered after that. Not short exactly, but lean in a way that made him look like someone had taken a larger design and made it more efficient. 5 feet 7 inches. 138 pounds. He moved through the gate checkpoint with the quiet ease of a man who has been in and out of secured facilities enough times that the process no longer holds any novelty. He clipped the visitor's badge to his collar. He shook hands briefly with Lieutenant Commander Gerald Hatch, the officer who had arranged the day's program. He looked around the yard with the unhurried attention of someone who is always interested in what he finds in a new room but is never surprised by it. He was wearing a dark jacket and clean black training pants. He carried a single canvas bag over one shoulder. He looked, if anything, like a man who had come to fix something minor. A scheduling problem, maybe. A plumbing issue that could be resolved in an hour. 200 combat-trained personnel watched him cross the yard. Cole Rafferty watched him from the back of the formation. He unfolded his arms briefly, took one full inventory of the approaching figure, then refolded his arms. His expression went through something very fast and settled into something flat and certain. His training partner, a master chief named Bowman, leaned over slightly. "That's the guy." Rafferty did not answer, which was itself an answer. The visitor's name was Bruce Lee. And in November of 1972, at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, that name meant almost nothing to most of the men standing in that yard. The film Enter the Dragon had not yet been released. The international reputation that would eventually make that name recognizable to anyone with access to a cinema was still months away from existing in its full form. What circulated in military circles was fragmentary. The Green Hornet. A TV actor. Some Chinese guy who ran a kung fu school out in Los Angeles and gave interviews about fighting philosophy. Some people had heard the name. Most of those who had heard it attached it to entertainment. To the specific category of things that were impressive in the way that theater was impressive and irrelevant in the way that theater was irrelevant to actual violence. Cole Rafferty had heard the name exactly once, 3 days prior, when Hatch had briefed him on the day's program. He had filed it immediately and without much deliberation into a category he had used many times before. Movie star. Performer. Someone who had learned how to make fighting look convincing rather than how to make it work. He watched the small man cross his yard and said nothing out loud. But his face said the rest. Now, before we go any further with what happened on that concrete yard, I need to stop for a moment and ask you something honest. Have you ever walked into a room where someone decided what you were before you opened your mouth? Have you felt that specific thing, the look that comes from someone who has already completed their assessment, already closed your file, already moved on to confirming what they decided before you arrived? Not cruelty necessarily. Not even conscious. Just the quiet, automated certainty of a mind that believes it already has enough information. Because what is about to happen between Cole Rafferty and the man crossing that yard is not really a story about martial arts. It is a story about the catastrophic cost of a closed file. About what happens when a man who has never been wrong about anything in his category of expertise encounters something that does not fit any category he has developed, and what that realization costs him, and what he does with the cost. Stay through every second of what comes next. Because 11 seconds is not a long time. But it is long enough to dismantle something a man has spent 16 years believing about himself and the world. Do not move. Drop a like on this video right now, because what I am about to tell you will change how you think about preparation, about assumption, and about the difference between knowing something and being certain of it. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story built this way. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been the person who got filed away before the file was opened? Because this community is built for exactly that kind of person. Now, back to Coronado. Back to that yard. Back to Cole Rafferty standing at the back of the formation with his arms folded, watching a 138-pound man who he has already decided everything about. Here is what Cole Rafferty did not know about the man crossing his yard, because here is what is almost never included in the category of things people decide to know about Bruce Lee before they have any direct experience of him. Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco in 1940 and raised in Hong Kong, in the narrow, crowded streets of Kowloon, in the specific density and noise of a city that does not waste space. He began studying Wing Chun under the Grandmaster Yip Man at 13 years old. Not because his family wanted him to. Because he was 13 and already in the kind of street trouble that required a practical answer. The art gave him that answer and then, as it does with certain kinds of minds, gave him something deeper to think about than the answer. He returned to the United States in 1959 at 18. He settled in Seattle. He began teaching martial arts almost immediately, and almost immediately he began doing something that made the traditional martial arts establishment furious. He started pulling everything apart. Not politely. Not with the deference that institutions require. He questioned loudly, publicly, in rooms full of grandmasters, in front of students, in interviews that circulated through the community like fire through dry grass. He said that rigid systems produced rigid fighters. He said that a tradition which told you what to do in every situation had already decided what you could not do in any situation. He said that a belt was a piece of cloth and what mattered was whether the person wearing it could function under real pressure against a real opponent who had not agreed in advance to fit the categories the training had prepared for. The Chinese martial arts community challenged him formally to a match. If he lost, he was to stop teaching non-Chinese students and close his school. He did not lose. The challenger submitted in approximately 3 minutes, and Bruce Lee went back to teaching everyone who came through his door with genuine intention. What he built over the years that followed is not accurately described as a style. He was furious when people called it one. He called it Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, and he would explain to anyone patient enough to listen that the name itself was the least important part of the thing. The important part was the philosophy underneath the name. The idea that real combat ability came from stripping away everything that wasn't absolutely true about how force worked between two bodies, and rebuilding from that foundation outward. Not from tradition inward. His reflexes had been tested in laboratory conditions in the late 1960s. The equipment required high-speed cameras because the human eye could not track his strikes in real time. His 1-inch punch, a strike launched from 1 inch of distance with no wind-up, no preparation, no runway, generated force exceeding 350 pounds per square inch. His training notebooks contained pages and pages of anatomical diagrams, physics notes, dietary protocols, training variables, and philosophical fragments written in the margins, the accumulated evidence of a man who approached the human body as the most interesting engineering problem he could find and who had never stopped trying to solve it more completely. He was 138 pounds. He was the most precisely prepared human being in any physical confrontation that had happened in that decade, and almost no one standing in that yard at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado knew it yet. Before we get to the confrontation, I want to take 60 seconds for something that matters to people who have been watching this channel for a while. Because if the Bruce Lee you carry in your head is the version from the films, from the flying kicks and the nunchaku and the one-liners, then you are working with the surface. And the surface, as Bruce himself said to anyone who cared to listen, is always the least interesting part of anything. Earlier this year we released the Bruce Lee Code, a genuine deep dive into the philosophy, the actual training methodology, the dietary principles, and the daily discipline structure of a man who spent his entire adult life trying to find out what was true about the human body rather than what was comfortable to believe about it. The response from readers changed how we think about this community. We received messages from fighters and coaches and ordinary people who said it changed how they approached preparation, how they understood their own limits, what they decided serious work actually looks like when it is done without shortcuts and without an audience. Because of that response, we built something free. A companion piece. It is called Bruce Lee's 5 Secret Life Rules. 5 principles sourced directly from his personal notebooks and training logs. Not the poster quotes. Not the things he said for interviews. The operational logic underneath those things. The actual thinking that produces a man who can walk into a Navy base, be publicly dismissed as a movie star by the most qualified person in the room, and 11 seconds later leave 200 combat-trained personnel standing in complete silence. The link is in the description right now. Your name, your email, one confirmation, and it arrives in your inbox permanently and completely free. The reason it costs nothing is simple. We believe the door should be open. What people do after they walk through it, that is their choice. The link is there. Now, back to 1972. Back to Coronado. Back to the moment this morning stopped being ordinary. Lieutenant Commander Hatch had organized the day with the clean efficiency of an officer who respected both his guest and his personnel equally. The program called for Bruce to begin with a brief orientation, move through a series of movement and application demonstrations, and then open the floor for voluntary participation from any personnel who wanted to engage with the material directly. It was, on paper, civilized. Bruce set his canvas bag down near the base of the heavy bag frame. He shook Hatch's hand. He looked at 200 men standing in formation with the same steady, curious attention he gave every room he entered, the way a craftsman looks at the work of other craftsmen, with genuine interest and without the need to establish hierarchy before any conversation starts. He began with movement. Basic Wing Chun structure first. The centerline theory. The way the body could be organized against itself to generate force without requiring bulk. He moved through the stances slowly, explaining the geometry as he went, and the formation watched with the particular quality of silence that 200 trained physical specialists produce when they encounter something they recognize as different from what their training has prepared them to categorize. Most of them. When he moved to the heavy bag, the first punch landed and the sound was wrong. Not the flat crack of a hard strike against a surface. Something deeper. Something that seemed to originate inside the bag rather than at the point of contact. The SEALs closest to the bag exchanged a look they had not planned to exchange. 2 of them stepped forward slightly without meaning to. Cole Rafferty, at the back of the formation, unfolded his arms. Not because he was impressed. Because he had just completed a decision. He walked forward through the group. The formation parted for him without being asked, which is what happens when 242 pounds of Master Chief Petty Officer moves with a specific kind of intent. He stopped when he was close enough for his voice to carry to the whole yard without effort. He spoke the way men speak when they have decided they are doing someone a service by being direct. With respect to the commander and to our guest, he said, and neither the respect nor the guest received the full weight those words might have carried in another context. I've sat through this kind of demonstration before. Different system, same fundamentals. Speed work, bag drills, structural concepts. It looks real when there's nothing pushing back. He looked at Bruce directly. The look was not aggressive. It was something more dismissive than aggression. It was bored. No offense meant to the gentleman. I'm sure you're very good at what you do for the camera. But this isn't a camera. These are my people. And what I'm seeing isn't what wins a fight. 200 men stood very still. Bruce stopped. He looked at Rafferty with the same unhurried attention he had given the bag, the yard, the water when he first crossed the gate. He did not appear to have received an insult. He appeared to have received a piece of information he found genuinely interesting. "What would change that for you?" Bruce said. Rafferty's jaw shifted almost imperceptibly. He had not expected the question to return to him that cleanly or that quickly. "Show me on a person," he said. "On someone who is not cooperating. Someone who is genuinely trying to stop you." Bruce looked at him steadily. "You?" The courtyard absorbed that word and held it. Rafferty looked at the 200 men around him. He looked at the lieutenant commander to his left. He looked back at the 138-pound man in the dark jacket standing in front of the heavy bag frame. He had never declined a direct physical challenge from a smaller man in 16 years of military service. He was not built to do it. He was not constituted to do it. And he understood, on some level that did not need articulating, that every man in this formation was already watching to see what he would do. "All right," Rafferty said. "Me." They moved to the mats. The 200 men rearranged themselves into a rough perimeter around the gray canvas, close enough to see but back far enough to give the space its proper dimensions. Lieutenant Commander Hatch stood at the edge with the expression of a man who had authorized this day and was only now beginning to fully appreciate the range of outcomes it contained. Rafferty rolled his neck. He cracked his knuckles, one hand and then the other, slowly, with the deliberateness of a man establishing ownership of the next few minutes. He settled into the ready position that 16 years of the most demanding physical training in American military history produces, feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, hands loose, the layered foundation of a man who could strike, grapple, absorb, and continue under conditions that would end most physical confrontations before they reached their second exchange. Bruce stood 6 feet away from him and stood in nothing that anyone present could name. His feet were just past shoulder width. His arms hung at his sides, loose but not careless. His weight sat in his frame in a way that was impossible to read from the outside. Not forward, not back, not committed to any direction, simply present in the space the way water fills a container, without preference, without angle, without any of the readable preparatory tension that trained fighters learn to identify and respond to. He looked, to anyone watching who had not spent time very close to genuine mastery, like a man waiting for something to arrive. To Cole Rafferty, who had spent 16 years developing the ability to read the physical intention of other men under pressure, he looked like nothing comprehensible at all. Rafferty studied him for a full 10 seconds. He was not arrogant enough to charge without reading. He had not survived this long by confusing confidence with recklessness. He looked for the lean, the load, the small preparatory tensions in the shoulder or the hip that a man's body produces when it is about to do something, because the body always tells you before the decision is fully executed if you know how to listen. He found nothing. Not a reduced signal. Nothing. The man in front of him had removed everything readable from his body and left behind a stillness that Rafferty had never encountered in 16 years of looking at men who were about to fight. This was information. He did not yet know what to do with it. "Ready when you are," Bruce said. "Same," Rafferty said. The courtyard was silent enough that the Pacific was audible behind it. Rafferty moved first. He always moved first. The doctrine that 16 years of training had built into the architecture of his response was unambiguous on this point. Hesitation is a choice and it is the wrong one. The initiative belongs to the man willing to take it, and Cole Rafferty had never once in his career been the man who didn't. He covered the 6 feet between them in one explosive drive off his back foot. 242 pounds launching with the full accelerative capability of a human body that had been tuned to this specific task for the better part of 2 decades. His right arm came up as he closed. Not a punch. A clinch entry. Get a hand on the head, trap one arm, drive the body sideways, compress the fight into the narrow space where his size and strength became impossible to resist. This was second one. Bruce was not there. Not backward. Not to the side in the conventional sense of a step and a pivot and a prepared evasion. He had simply shifted his presence in the geometry of the exchange so that by the time Rafferty's right hand arrived at the coordinates where Bruce's shoulder had been, the shoulder occupied a different set of coordinates. The adjustment was perhaps 4 inches. Perhaps 5. It was the minimum necessary movement and nothing else. No drama, no flourish, no visible effort. The way a door swings on a well-oiled hinge. Rafferty's momentum carried him 2 full steps past his intended stopping point. This was second 2. He recovered fast. Faster than a man his size had any right to recover, which was itself a testament to the quality of what he had built over those 16 years, and he came back around immediately. His left hand this time, going lower, reaching for the midsection, a wrap and smother attempt designed to get contact, get weight on top, compress the exchange into the floor where mass was the only language that mattered. Bruce's right hand met his forearm at the wrist. The contact was almost nothing. Lighter than a check at a doorframe. And then Rafferty's arm was traveling in a direction it had not chosen, his weight following it out and forward, and for the first time in the exchange he felt something that he did not have a previous experience of in physical confrontations. He felt redirected. Not stopped. Not blocked. Redirected. His own force sent somewhere it had not intended to go, as if the mathematics of the encounter had been altered from the outside while he was still calculating with the original numbers. This was second 4. He reset. His breathing was controlled. He was a professional and professionals train through confusion, they do not stop for it. He widened his base, dropped his center of gravity, made himself heavier and more anchored. A conscious tactical adjustment. If forward pressure was not producing the result, he would make himself a fixed point and let the smaller man attempt to move the fixed point. In 16 years, nothing had successfully moved Rafferty when he decided to be unmovable. He planted and waited. This was second 5. Bruce moved. Not toward Rafferty's body, toward the space to the outside of Rafferty's right arm, the one angle in the geometry of a large man's frame where reach was longest and control was most limited, the one position where the mass that was his greatest advantage converted into momentum he could not fully govern. He moved to the place where the weight worked against its owner rather than for him. Rafferty's hand shot out. Fast. Genuinely fast, fast in the way that was not supposed to be available to a man his size, and his right hand found Bruce's left forearm and closed. For a full half-second, Cole Rafferty had Bruce Lee. The courtyard felt this. 200 men registered it simultaneously. Even Hatch, who had been watching with the controlled expression of a man trying to look like he had planned for all possible outcomes, registered it. The energy in the perimeter shifted. The collective breath held differently. Rafferty began to pull. The mechanical, inexorable retraction of a hand that had more structural weight behind it than the thing it was holding, the motion that had ended every serious grappling exchange he had initiated in his career. His grip was absolute. He could feel the bone in Bruce's forearm. He could feel the tendons. There was nothing there that should be able to resist what was behind his grip, and it wasn't going to. This was second 7. What happened in the following second and a half has been described, argued over, and retold in training halls and military briefing rooms for decades since. Bruce did not resist the pull. His forearm rotated inside the grip. A small motion. 35 degrees, perhaps 40. The kind of thing that looked like almost nothing from any distance greater than 3 feet. The physics of this rotation are worth understanding because nothing magical occurred inside those 35 degrees. What occurred was geometry. A grip applied along the pulling axis is absolute. The force and the grip work in the same direction and reinforce each other. The tighter the pull, the more secure the hold. But a grip applied to something that rotates against the plane of the fingers is a different mechanical problem entirely. The grip must now manage 2 directions simultaneously. The force it was built to apply in one axis begins working against itself in the perpendicular axis. The friction between the palm and the forearm changes. The contact surface slides. The grip did not break. It slid. And in the fraction of a second where Cole Rafferty's grip went from absolute to something fractionally less than absolute, Bruce's right hand moved through the gap that fraction had created. Open palm. Not a fist. Not a strike intended to cause structural damage. A placement. His right hand came to rest, flat and still, against the center of Rafferty's chest. It sat there. This was second 9. Then Bruce's left leg swept forward in a low, close arc that found Rafferty's lead ankle at the precise instant when his weight was loading forward to compensate for the grip change, when his center of gravity had moved past his base and had not yet recovered from the direction it had expected to be going. The timing was clinical. Not fast, clinical. The sweep did not fight the weight. It found the moment when the weight had no floor beneath it and confirmed that fact. 242 pounds went down. Not hard. Not dangerously. Not like a man who had been struck. Like a man whose foundation had been quietly removed from underneath him while he was still relying on it. Rafferty landed on one knee, the other foot scrambling for purchase on the gray canvas mat, his body taking a long and honest moment to accept what his balance had already communicated. This was second 11. The courtyard was silent. Not quieter. Silent. The particular silence of 200 trained and serious men who have just encountered something that does not fit the map they have been using to navigate the physical world. The particular silence of men who know enough to know that what they just watched was not a trick and was not luck and was not anything that belonged in the category they had been applying to it since the civilian sedan came through the gate at 0847. Complete, total, base-wide silence. For a long moment, nothing moved. The Pacific continued behind the fence. The November air moved across the concrete. Cole Rafferty was on one knee on the gray canvas, looking at the space directly in front of him with the expression of a man trying to locate something he has always kept in one place and finding that it is no longer there. Bruce Lee stood 2 feet away from him. His breathing was unchanged. His jacket had not shifted. He was watching Rafferty with the same patient, interested attention he had given the yard when he arrived, and there was nothing in his posture that anyone present could have identified as satisfaction. He extended his right hand, palm facing up. "Stand up," he said. Rafferty took the hand. He came to his full height again. He stood a full head above the man who had just put him on the ground, and he looked at him with an expression that had emptied itself of everything it had held at the beginning of the morning and was now waiting, without pretense, to receive something it had not contained before. "What was that?" Rafferty said. It was not quite a question and not quite a statement. It was the thing a man says when the categories available to him have temporarily run out. "Which part?" Bruce said. Rafferty looked at his own hand. He opened it, closed it. "The grip. You didn't fight it." "No. You moved with it." "The grip was built for a specific direction," Bruce said. "It was very strong in that direction. But the moment it met rotation, it had to work in 2 directions simultaneously, and a grip that is absolute in one direction is significantly less than absolute when the geometry changes beneath it. I did not fight your strength. I changed the problem your strength was being applied to." Rafferty absorbed this. He looked at the mat. He looked at the place where he had landed. "And the sweep. Your weight was moving forward to compensate for the grip shift. Your lead ankle was bearing the full load at exactly the moment when it had the least structural support from your center. I did not throw you. Your own compensation threw you. I simply confirmed the direction it was already going." A sound moved through the formation. Not laughter. Something that did not have a clean military designation. 200 men in some stage of revising something they had believed about the world before this morning. Lieutenant Commander Hatch stepped forward. He had the careful, considered expression of a man who had just watched something he was going to be asked to describe in a report and was still determining how to describe it accurately. He looked at Rafferty first. "You all right, Master Chief?" "Fine, sir." The fine was a position from which he intended to move. Everyone present understood this. Hatch looked at Bruce. "I want to apologize on behalf of—" "There is no apology needed," Bruce said. Not dismissively. With genuine simplicity. He said what was on most minds in this yard. He simply said it out loud, which is more honest than the version where people think it and say nothing. He turned to Rafferty. And what happened in the look that passed between them was not triumph and was not condescension and was not any of the things that look like victory when a smaller man has put a larger one on the ground in front of his entire command. It was the look of a man who has been given someone's attention for the first time and intends to use it well. "What you built is genuine," Bruce said. "Your conditioning, your reflex, your ability to absorb damage and continue functioning. I am not dismissing any of it. These are real. But there is a layer that lives underneath technique. Underneath all of it. It is not strength and it is not speed, because strength and speed operate on what is already happening. What I am describing operates on what is about to happen." He paused. "You fight with the information your body has already collected. The problem is that collection takes time. And in the time your system needs to identify what category of threat it is processing, a great deal has already been determined. 1/4 of a second," he said. "Sometimes less. But 1/4 of a second is not nothing." The courtyard held his words the way a room holds a temperature after the source of heat has been removed. Rafferty looked at him for a long time. The certainty was gone from his face. Not the confidence, the certainty. Which in a man like Cole Rafferty was a much more significant thing to lose because the certainty had been built on a foundation of being unquestionably right in every physical encounter for 16 years. And it had just encountered something that foundation was not designed to support. "Can you teach it?" he said. "Parts of it," Bruce said. "The parts that live in the body rather than the mind. Those can be trained. The rest has to be arrived at by a different road." Rafferty nodded. Once. The slow, careful nod of a man filing something under a category that did not previously exist in his system. Hatch waited until the initial exchange had fully settled before he spoke. He had learned over 23 years of command that the timing of a request mattered as much as the request itself, and this one he had been constructing in his mind since Second 11. He approached Bruce directly. "Mr. Lee, we have 3 days before this group transitions into pre-deployment preparation. I would like to ask you to spend those 3 days here." He paused. Not to give a demonstration. To teach. Bruce looked at the formation. 200 men, not in the same configuration they had been in at the beginning of the morning, not arranged the same way inside themselves. He looked at Rafferty, who was standing where he had risen from the mat, arms at his sides, watching with the full attention of a man who has just discovered he has been approaching a subject incorrectly for a very long time. "All right," Bruce said. 3 days. What happened across those 3 days is a story that deserves its own account. The Chesaw sensitivity drills that left Navy SEALs who had trained for years looking at their own hands in confusion. The 1-inch punch demonstration on a volunteer who outweighed Bruce by 80 pounds and traveled backward 4 feet before he found the wall. The conversation on the second morning, when a SEAL named Torres who had been skeptical for 48 consecutive hours finally ran out of skepticism and asked a genuine question, and the room that formed around the answer was the quietest room the base had produced in years. But the account that people carried out of Coronado, the one that moved through martial arts circles and military briefing rooms and quiet conversations between serious practitioners for decades afterward, was not from any of the 3 days of teaching. It was from Second 11 on the first morning. Cole Rafferty found Bruce near the equipment table at the end of the final afternoon. The yard was emptying. Men were moving back toward their units carrying something invisible but present in the altered quality of how they moved through the space, something they had arrived without. Rafferty did not approach with any of the residual posture of the man who had made the dismissal that started the morning. That posture was gone completely, and its absence was more informative than its presence had been. "I owe you something," he said. Bruce waited. "I called you a movie star in front of my people." He did not look away while he said it. That was specific ignorance. Not general. "I had information available to me that I chose not to use, because I had already decided what you were and the information did not fit the decision." He paused. "I was 16 years into never being wrong about a physical question. That is a long time to go without learning that you can be wrong." "You were working with the map you had," Bruce said. "It was missing territory. Most maps are. The dangerous part is not the missing territory. It is the conviction that the map is complete." Bruce picked up his canvas bag. "You assumed you already understood what I was because you had seen the category I appeared to fit. And every time I did something that didn't fit the category, your system paused to recalculate. And in every pause, Rafferty said quietly, you were already somewhere else." "Yes." They shook hands. Properly. Not as a performance. The handshake of two people who have come through something genuinely honest and emerged from it with a different understanding of each other than they entered it with. There is a reason this story has persisted in the places where serious people discuss what fighting actually requires. Not in the rooms where people compare techniques and argue about systems. In the rooms where practitioners who have spent decades inside a single discipline are trying to locate the precise line between what can be trained and what is something else. What Bruce Lee did in those 11 seconds was not the product of faster reflexes applied to a standard physical problem. It was the product of something that operates one register below where most training programs reach. He was not reading Rafferty's body. He was reading Rafferty's intention. The body follows intention with a lag. The decision exists first. And between the decision and the movement, there is a space, invisible to most observers and to most training systems, where force has not yet been committed and nothing has been finalized. Bruce had spent 20 years building sensitivity to that space until it lived in his tissue rather than his conscious processing. Until his body knew where the force was going before the force knew where it was going. The rotation that freed his forearm from Rafferty's grip was not stronger than the grip. It was geometrically superior to the grip, which is an entirely different kind of advantage and one that does not respond to any amount of additional grip training. The sweep that removed Rafferty's foundation was not faster than Rafferty's ability to plant. It arrived at the precise moment when planting was not yet possible, which required not speed but timing, and timing is a category of skill that most combat systems treat as a byproduct of other things rather than a discipline in itself. Rafferty was a world-class physical instrument. He had been assembled by the most demanding institutional process the United States military offers and had never failed under any conditions he had been placed in. In 11 seconds he had encountered a category of opponent his instrument was not calibrated to address. Not better by degree. Different in category. That was the real lesson of the yard. Not the defeat on the mat. The discovery that the territory of what was possible in a physical confrontation extended beyond the edge of the map he had been using to navigate it for 16 years. Here is what I want you to take from this story. Not the technique. Not the 11 seconds. Something that does not belong to martial arts specifically but belongs to every domain where human beings bring certainty into contact with reality. Most of us carry maps that were given to us. By training, by experience, by the accumulated weight of years of things working in predictable ways. And we mistake the completeness of our confidence in those maps for the completeness of the territory they describe. Cole Rafferty had an exceptional map. A genuine, field-tested, earned map that had guided him successfully through 16 years of the hardest physical and tactical work available to a human being in uniform. And he walked into that yard with absolute confidence in that map, which meant that when the territory disagreed with it, he was briefly unable to see the territory at all. He could only see the contradiction. And in the fraction of a second between the contradiction and the correction, Bruce Lee had already made 11 decisions. The assumptions we carry are not always this dramatic. Most of them are never tested in 11 seconds on a gray canvas mat in front of 200 witnesses. They work quietly, beneath the floor of daily awareness, shaping what we see and what we dismiss, what we engage and what we file away as already understood. But the damage of an unexamined assumption is not simply that it makes you wrong about one particular thing. It is that it makes you blind to an entire class of information that does not fit the category you have already assigned. It costs you the fraction of a second your system needs to recalculate. And a fraction of a second, as a 138-pound man demonstrated on a Navy base in November of 1972, is everything. Bruce Lee lived inside this understanding every day he was alive. He met dismissal in every room he entered, from every direction, on account of his size and his background and his cultural heritage and his place in a country that had very clear and very particular ideas about what men from Hong Kong were capable of contributing to the physical culture of America. And he made a choice, every time, not to argue with the assumption. To demonstrate its incorrectness so precisely and so completely that the only conclusion available at the end was the right one. He did not need the room to decide he was worth taking seriously before he walked into it. He needed only to do what years of genuine preparation had made him capable of doing, with the honesty and the completeness that real work produces, and let the room's understanding catch up with the reality at whatever pace the room required. 11 seconds in Coronado. That was how long it took. And in the silence that filled the yard after those 11 seconds, in the specific quality of quiet that 200 combat-trained military professionals produce when something has removed the floor from under everything they thought they understood, something more durable than a victory was created. A question. A real one. The kind that does not resolve quickly and does not permit a comfortable answer. What else have I been certain about that I have never actually tested? That question is the inheritance of that courtyard. And if this story landed the way it was meant to, it belongs to you now too. If you stayed through every second of this, drop a like on this video right now. It takes 2 seconds and it tells the platform that stories built this carefully, from the actual truth of actual moments, are worth the time it takes to tell them. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. Because every story here is built the same way. From the specific principle outward. Not from the legend inward. Comment below the words 11 seconds. Just that. So I know who made it to the end. So I know who understood. This community is not built on view counts. It is built on the specific kind of person who listens to a story about what happened on a California military base in November and understands that the 11 seconds on the mat were purchased with 20 years of invisible preparation.